And they're offering not only an IoT platform, and it's quite different than what we've seen so far, but they're also offering real system expertise in the field of IoT. So without further ado,
No phone.
that is it.
All right, I'm a opening act for probably a three-part play here. We'll keep it short. My name's Tom Gilly. I just sold a company in IoT called Wadio. Actually, Mitchell was a very important participant in that exit. It was a marketplace of IoT applications that operate on data from connectivity platforms, like Core, although Core wasn't a partner, but others like Core. Learned a lot in building that company and selling it. Learned a lot about what type of applications are important to create value. I like what Dan said.
Could you stand there?
Yeah. I like what Dan said about to get the scale, we need to have intelligence and communications between the platforms. One of the applications in Wadio's exchange was a company called scriptr. I'm going to talk about the problem statement, then I'm going to introduce Rabia, who's the founder of scriptr. So before I introduce scriptr, let me tell you about what I see as an interesting problem statement. And it was brought up by Virgil and Dan in their presentation. And it's also been reflected by McKinsey and several others. Two big issues. Interoperability between connected device platforms. You saw Virgil's presentation with use case after use case after use case. And actually, in each use case, there may have been between 3 to 7 different platforms in that use case. And many of those platforms are data silos. They don't communicate with each other. It's an interoperability nightmare to put a solution out there for even a homeowner. I used to say enterprise, but even the homeowner. One of the companies that I was working with was a large cable operator, and they predict in the next 3 years that the homeowner is going to have near 20 different connected devices in their home. I think that's a little high, but let's say it's 10. Let's say there's 10 different connected devices in the home. That means 10 apps on your phone. And the mobile operator's saying, okay, well, that's just not going to work. We want to do what we did in media and create a consolidated user experience to make it really easy for the homeowner to interact with their devices, solve that interoperability problem. It's the same thing on the enterprise, although it's a much bigger issue on the enterprise. McKinsey says 40% of the value in connected devices in industrial, enterprise, all of the verticals you hear about is interoperability. It's a lockup problem. The other thing they say is that, okay, we get the data, even off a single platform, what do we do with that data? What value are we creating? And looking at the opportunities, at least came to me within Wadio, many of them were early stage operational awareness. I want to know maintenance, inventory, maybe some logistics or supply chain management. It was fairly, let's call it operational. That's probably the best word to call it. It's an expense into an enterprise. The enterprise is having a hard time justifying that return on investments to create a connected device environment because it's really creating efficiencies to a system that's already working. What you need to do is get the data to the business side of the organizations that are making decisions on what product features to add to the product. How do we market the product to our customers? So your Budweiser, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, you've got vending machines all over the world. You want to know what the demographic, the buying patterns. It's more than inventory management. It's actually looking at what the human behavior is. And that's correlating data from multiple platforms, including platforms that you wouldn't think of. I think you noticed IBM bought the Weather Channel for what I think is an insane valuation. But they bought it because of the data. They want to correlate that data with operational information from their very large clients. Hertz. You can imagine what Weather and Hertz might want to create. Another thing that's happening, and this goes back to Virgil's example of the use cases. That was a great presentation, just the nonstop use cases. Every one of those use cases represents a platform, as I said earlier. Here's a great chart from one of the local investment groups, Matt Kirk. Thought he might be here today. Is he here? Matt? No. So he put this together. This is a bit old. Since this has been pulled together by Matt, there's been almost a platform announced every week. And the big companies are in the game. These are, many of them are smaller ones. It's blurry for a reason. The Oracle, SAP, everyone's announcing, I've got an IoT device platform. Again, it's interoperability and creating value out of the data. As Dan said, that intelligence between the systems. Now, some might say, well, standards are going to fix this. But just like IoT platforms, but at a slower pace, there seems to be more and more standards. And there's confusion among the standards, not even listed on this. I like this chart. Came out of Center of Global Enterprise 2015, so it's pretty new. It's a nice visualization of where the investment is or who's paying attention to those standards. So large industry, Industrial Internet Consortium. I mean, how many people here probably heard of IIC? Pretty important what they're doing. And there's others. This doesn't have Google, it doesn't have Apple. Those are two huge companies that are basically creating Trojan horses that are going into not only homes, but into businesses that aren't on this chart. So standards aren't solving interoperability or creating value out of the data. So I recognize Scriptr, which you're going to hear about, as one of the companies that creates that intelligence, the interoperability and the intelligence out of the data in a pretty novel way. It was founded by Rabi, I think 2002. He's got 40 employees, revenue generating in the Middle East. It's like millions of users and maybe how many apps in the App Store? 80 apps in the App Store, a large number of apps. And that's a strong base, and it's a pivot into IoT from that platform. So with that, I'd like to give it to Rabi to.
Thank you, Tom. So, all right. I'm going to go one level that side.
You can walk around where you like.
Because I have the microphone, yeah?
Yeah.
It's not working?
Yeah.
Hello?
You're good.
You hear me? Okay. So I'm going to navigate below the strategic talk, and we recognize that we have a fundamental problem, which is the interoperability problem, how to make the platforms talk together, and how to add the layer of intelligence to all these sensors, and how to condition the data before throwing it into the data lakes to exploit it and analyze it. So we came up with this platform, Scriptr. At the basic use, the most fundamental use of Scriptr is described in this slide. This is somebody creating another nest, let's say. So somebody in his garage or an enterprise creating a new thermostat device, and they put on a prototype, and that prototype needs to. That's the things. Now we need the internet. The prototype needs to talk to the internet, the Internet of Things, and Scriptr can act as that intelligent platform in the cloud that does a number of functions. Illustrated, I don't think you can read it. The code that's in that little window, that's when you log into Scriptr, you get to see an IDE. That's one way of using it. And that code is practically a business logic that says, if the temperature is above a certain limit, send an email. And if the temperature has risen since the last reading, send a warning, something like that. What Scriptr allows people to do is to develop that quite fast. We're an Internet of Things rapid application development and delivery platform. And then when they're ready to move, when the developer of that application is ready to move into production, they don't lose their investment in that layer of logic that they have developed to power their platform. That's one problem. The other problem that we see with the Internet of Things is, everybody's talking about big data and the premise of the IoT to federate a lot of data and allow people to analyze it. But all big data starts as small data, and that path between that migration from the sensor to the big data lake is never straightforward. That data needs to be conditioned. It's actionable in real time. It needs to be transformed, filtered, etc. And that's another major problem that we solve with scriptr. Same thing, you have a ton of sensors. Before that data comes here to be used, scriptr allows developers, allows enterprise to create atomic business rules that would do filtering, transformation, orchestration, routing, etc., the functions that you would need to apply for that data in transit. Now, just going one level lower on the for the technical crowd, what scriptr, is there a laser here? Anyway, what scriptr allows developers to quickly develop. So it's developed in a rapid application development format and then brought into production immediately. So what developers would do, they would write whatever code, whatever business logic they need to power their application. Then that becomes a secure web service immediately. That's an endpoint that can be used as a RESTian web service, as a WebSocket, through MQTT, etc. And that endpoint can then be hooked into whatever application they're trying to solve, that they're trying to implement. The endpoints can be chained together, etc. No? Okay. Did I do something? I think the computer is frozen because even the arrow's not working. Or is working? Okay. This doesn't work. Huh? Okay. All right. So that's the one after. Yeah. Okay. So I showed you that basic layer, which is a scripting layer. We believe that's the fundamental business block. It allows people to get as sophisticated, as granular as they need to solve their business logic problem. But on top of that, for higher level use cases, we provide higher constructs that would allow someone who's not technical to drag and drop business rules and create that same filter, transformation, orchestration, or logic to power a device. I mean, we have a lot of those. I'm just showing those. So there's the business rule, the visual business rule. There's a finite state machine. So if you're trying to create an automation, that would be the best representation for that back-end logic, piece of logic. This is, it doesn't show. This is a decision table. So that's very interesting if you're doing filtering or transformation. So you're getting data and you need to, if the data fits a certain criteria, it comes out, it creates a certain action. And this would allow a business user to do that visually without having to write the code. But everything I'm showing you here ends up becoming a script. So people will be using these high-level constructs, but if they need to go one layer deeper, and because the logic, the application needs it, they can do it. That's another interesting plugin that we have that allows people to quickly create visualizations, create dashboards out of the data available in the system. Now, what I showed you the fundamental business, the fundamental building block, which is the scripting layer. I showed you what's on top of it, all these specific plugins that allow you to do decision tables or state machines, etc. Now, underneath the scripting layer, what scriptr really is. So we start, when you sign up, you start with a browser-based IDE. So developers can be productive immediately. You just sign up and you're immediately into an environment. You don't need to configure anything. You can start using the platform. That's in the browser. On the back end, I mean, if you do it through the website, the back end is deployed automatically. You generate the secure, scalable web services that are usable immediately, no administration required. But we can bring that to the enterprise, do on-site implementations, And we also have a version of scriptr that can be deployed from the cloud into edge nodes. So if a certain application requires that kind of smart layer to be deployed on the edge, so the same paradigms that you've seen that would work in the cloud on-premise would work also on the edge devices. And so that's the browser, the back end. Under the hood on the back end, you've seen just the scripting layer, and what's on top of it, we have 80 internal APIs that solve the fundamental problems that you need when you're developing either an application or you're solving the interoperability problem between applications, which are you need identity management, device management, user management, persistence. You have access immediately to a database, a NoSQL database system, messaging, social integration, enterprise integration, etc. And so these are the classes of internal APIs that we provide. All this is being provided just to make it extremely efficient for people to start being productive. They don't need to figure out additional moving parts to integrate them into the environment for them to start developing solutions. And all these are optional. We have certain cases, customers that are using all our internal features. In other cases, they're just using our scripting capabilities and some of the higher level concepts, and they're using their own databases or their own messaging systems. So these are our main features. We're instantaneous and free. You can go on the website, subscribe, auto-provisioned, and you can start being productive. Universal platform support. We have SDKs for almost everything, and we're doing integrations with all the major IoT platforms. JavaScript-based, that's the most widely misunderstood computer language, but used computer language. So we want to, so practically the learning curve is non-existent because any JavaScript developer, front end or back end or whatever, can be productive immediately. Scalable, we manage that. The application developer does not have to worry about that aspect. Private cloud on-premise and on the edge device. Secure, everything that we do, every resource in the system is secure. It has an ACL attached to it, and you can only access it with a token that represents a device or a user, and everything is ACL managed. And cost effective, I believe that's clear. Tom, you want to do the demo?
Great.
Here's your clicker. Thank you.
All right, so what I thought I'd do is wrap up with a use case that we did at Mobile World Congress. We might be able to demonstrate this live if I can figure out how to get this onto the screen. What we're going to see here is a LoRa devices gateway. It's multi-tech, and then we used a baby version of Core. It's a connectivity provider in the UK called Stream Technologies. Their IoT X platform is aggregating the data from LoRa devices and then creating an API. The API is a WebSocket API. And then we ingest that data. Into scriptr, and all of the constructs and paradigms that Rabia described are really easy to use. We're able to connect to the IoTX connectivity platform with an adapter. It converts it from WebSocket into data that can be transformed and manipulated, and then converted into HTTP for another enterprise service. The enterprise service, the first step is data discovery. For anyone here that's implemented or is going to implement a connected device solution, you're going to go through this phase of trying to figure out what your data is. Probably the worst case scenario is in healthcare. We did a project. It's amazing how undefined and messy the data comes off the healthcare system. You have to go through some sort of data discovery. So one of the data services or applications that we have is called Initial State. It's a nice data visualization, enterprise data visualization tool. Once you understand the data, then you can create a data dictionary, and then you can format that data to an enterprise system. Like, for instance, Informatica. Informatica is a company that creates enterprise application integration middleware. It's pretty well known. It's has many adapters to those enterprise systems that a business user would have in their organization. What we do is we can bridge that operational data that I described earlier, which is stuck in IT, and then bring it into the business by doing the intelligence and the transform, and then making it available to like Informatica as a middleware platform, which then can be available in Salesforce, NetSuite, SAP, Microsoft. So use case would be vending machines I mentioned earlier, inventory management, deploying of the product to the vending machines. But then that can go into their Salesforce for doing sales calls, NetSuite for their accounts payable, accounts receivable, just creating connectivity from what had been mundane operational awareness into business systems. That's what's happening. That's what the enterprise wants out of their IoT systems.
Just 1 second.
Okay. We don't have to struggle with this. It's okay.
It should work. It should work.
Maybe you have to slide it
Ruby,
across.
have a second?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, we tried.
we tried this.
One second. Can you turn off mirroring? Just turn off mirroring.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Good.
Did it show? No. Can we drag it there?
There you go.
There you go.
I can do it.
You can do it?
I can do it. All right. So this is the scripter environment that Rabi was describing earlier. Here are a couple of connectors. You can introspect those connectors, the code that's a part of connecting to the systems that I described in that block diagram. I'm not going to go through the script here and start a programming seminar. Just give you an idea of, here's IoTX, that's the connectivity platform. These are the scripts that connect to that platform, do the data transform, and then present the data to, in this particular case, it's a visualization solution called Initial State. These are operating, as Rabi mentioned, without having to think about any of the back-end operational systems. It's develop, deploy, scale. And then Initial State, here's one of the buckets. This is live.
Try this, sorry, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to maximize so you see the whole window.
All right. So this is coming off of one of the LoRa devices now. And on the left-hand side are the data elements within the payload that's coming off that low-power radio device. And here, I start to experiment and understand what the data is. And you might say that that seems odd. It was interesting. We went out to dinner the other night with a very large construction company. It was the 11th in the world. And they said one of the biggest issues that they had in creating their connected device systems was discovering the data from those connected device systems. And the reason was, one, the vendors didn't want to supply the data. They didn't want to give it to the customer. Two, the product is old, and either they don't have the documentation or the people that developed the product are no longer available. So they have to do a lot of data discovery to create a cohesive, intelligent, connected system. And then what I'm going to show you is another step here. All right, so this is also done with scriptr. So scriptr doesn't just deal with the interoperability of data systems and then creating value out of the data. It also allows you to develop widgets and presentation layers of that data. This is a replay of the data from the LoRa device that I was carrying around Barcelona and Mobile World Congress. So this is what you would expect. It's an interactive Google map with data points from the LoRa device. That whole end-to-end, from developing the scripts to going through data discovery, trying to understand what the data payload looked like, to creating the map, from the very beginning, took no more than a couple of days. Now, once that's done, once I have the connectors, the scripts done, it's no more than actually, a half hour to put a system together with the elements that I've just described. Okay, so that's it. Is there any questions?
So at the edge level on the sensor or gateway level, you have some type of ecosystem partnership that you have a requirement to run your agent on top of it or et cetera. Is that open to all the hardware vendors?
That's a great question. You want to try not to put an agent on an edge device because that's a barrier to business. Every customer has their own agent on the device. Remember that chart I put up with all those logos? Every one of those platforms has its own device agent, and then usually a gateway, then a back-end cloud system. So Scriptr and those scripts that I presented are meant to adapt to what already exists. Does that make sense? Rabi also mentioned if it's a greenfield opportunity, we can put agents on devices. We can, although there's so much business out there, it's really important to connect with what's already in market. I mean, the connected device industry, this IoT, has been around for decades, decades. It's just now that we're starting to understand what it means to combine and correlate data to create business value, and that's where IoT, it's being driven by the business requirements. But creating connected factories, connected farms, connected everything has been around. It's just accelerating at this moment.
One of your goals was it was free. How do you make money?
Well, free is marketing. You want to onboard as many people as you possibly can with as low a barrier. So we have two ways where we make money once we get people excited about what it is that we do. If they're a small customer, they can use the free offering. If they start to go into production, which is seamless, then it's called a freemium business model, so they pay for the service as they go. But most importantly, it's the enterprise software model. That's what I like in starting companies because that's where you start to see more significant revenues. So it's licensing the product. Either we're hosting it for them, a managed hosted service, or we deploy it on premise and they host it. But, yeah.
What cloud platforms are you kind of with?
Say that again?
What cloud platforms like Amazon, Azure?
Yes, so the cloud platforms, we've got Amazon, SoftLayer, Azure, anything that's OpenStack based, basically anything that's got a hypervisor with a virtual machine. We have a deployment in beta that's been Dockerized, to use a new term, but using Docker as a way of containerizing it so it can be deployed across many different platforms. That's very important, especially when you deal with on-premise. Some of these enterprise customers have invested a lot in their own premise, like Core as an example. So if we were to do something with Core and they wanted to offer it off their infrastructure, it would need to work within their infrastructure, almost always. Any other questions? Okay, well, very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom and Rabia from Scriptr.